Now at noon, nationwide protests after another shooting sparks a new wave of anger. We are hearing from the family of an Atlanta man killed by police. And a landmark decision from the U.S. Supreme Court today. The ruling protecting LGBTQ workers and the caveat from Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley. Plus, just an incredible opportunity for a young entrepreneur. How he's finally really getting to see his own product for the very first time.
This is KGW News at noon.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Brenda Braxton. So we start with a huge victory in the fight for equal rights. Today, the Supreme Court ruled federal law protects LGBTQ workers from job discrimination. That 6-3 decision found that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 protects gay, lesbian, and transgender workers. It'll shield more than 8 million employees. Today's historic ruling is a defeat for the Trump administration. It argued the Civil Rights Act, which bars discrimination based on sex, did not extend to claims of gender identity and sexual orientation. Oregon lawmakers are weighing in on this. Senator Jeff Merkley called today's ruling an important victory for LGBTQ rights. He says the law of the land is now clear that discrimination against LGBTQ Americans in employment is illegal. The Supreme Court made the right decision today. Now to that caveat I mentioned. Senator Merkley says there is still a lot of work to be done getting equal protections in housing, public accommodations, and education. He's trying to pass the Equality Act, which would provide those protections.
There's no justice that can ever make me feel happy about what's been done. I can never get my husband back. I can never get my best friend. I can never tell my daughter, oh, he's coming to take you skating or swimming lessons.
Emotional words from the widow of Rayshard Brooks. He was killed by officers in Atlanta, sparking more protests across the country against the police shootings of black people. Brooks was killed on the same day that his daughter celebrated her 8th birthday. His family is calling for justice, a change in policing, and peaceful protests. NBC's Tracy Potts takes a closer look at what happened in Atlanta.
Anger and frustration spilling into the streets of Atlanta after another police shooting involving a black man. The scene of that shooting torched over the weekend. Rayshard Brooks was running away when he appeared to point a taser at officers. Officer Garrett Rolfe shot and killed him. Rolfe was fired. The police chief resigned.
That video is disturbing to watch, but I'm not sure that it's as clear as what we've seen around the country on some of the other issues.
This latest shooting comes as Congress considers police reform, tracking misconduct, and eliminating chokeholds and no-knock warrants.
These are meaningful reforms that will hold police accountable.
Have an act that requires more data to be provided so that we can actually come out with policies that are consistent.
Lawmakers pressured by protesters to pull money from police and reinvest it into social services.
Nobody is going to defund the police. We can restructure the police forces, reimagine policing. That is what we're going to do.
The medical examiner has ruled Brooks' death a homicide, 2 bullets in the back, fueling growing frustration and demands for change. Tracy Potts, NBC News.
Here in Oregon, protests and demonstrations continue. At Jefferson High School last night, the statue of Thomas Jefferson was taken down, and the words "slave owner" are written there on the pedestal. Jefferson was the country's 3rd president and one of the authors of the Declaration of Independence, but he also owned hundreds of slaves. Jefferson High School was the starting point of last night's protests. People rallied there before marching to Alberta Park in Northeast Portland. We saw similar nonviolent demonstrations on Saturday. People gathered at Revolution Hall. And a group of cyclists also demonstrated at Irving Park. Meantime, people were back out at the Justice Center on Saturday and Sunday. Police called a civil disturbance on both nights and dispersed the crowd, arresting several people. They say that demonstrators threw fireworks and glass bottles over the fence. Portland City Council will have another chance to vote on the budget this week. The mayor and city commissioners plan to cut the gun violence reduction team and the transit unit. They also wanted to redirect $15 million from the police budget to communities of color. But Commissioner Chloe Eudaly and many activists say that's not enough. Eudaly voted against the budget last week, forcing another vote on Wednesday. We'll let you know if there are any changes to the proposal. Local activists also wanting to change the name of a street in the St. John's neighborhood because of who it's named after. According to the people behind a Change.org petition, Calhoun Avenue is named after John C. Calhoun, America's 7th vice president and a staunch defender of slavery. The petition would rename the street DePriest Avenue after James DePriest. He was the first African-American conductor at the Oregon Symphony.
It's only four blocks, so it's not a big expense for the city.
And I think our one concern is that DePriest probably deserves a much bigger street.
We reached out to PBOT. It couldn't confirm the street was named after John Calhoun, but it said it is willing to review any street name that has a history associated with racism or white supremacy. Now to our coverage of the coronavirus. The FDA is pulling its permission to use malaria drugs to treat COVID-19. President Trump frequently touted hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine as treatments, but the FDA now says those drugs pose a greater risk to patients than any potential benefits. The medications can cause an irregular heartbeat, severely low blood pressure, and muscle and nerve damage. These malaria drugs are also used to treat lupus and arthritis, but today's decision only affects its emergency use for COVID-19. Well, here in Oregon, the number of new COVID infections is going up. But what do we need to consider to put that spike in context? Galen Etlin found out when he talked to the PSU biology professor known as the virus hunter.
Dr. Ken Stedman at PSU studies viruses and checks Oregon's numbers daily.
With everything that's going on with COVID-19, I think we need to be extremely careful about what data are data and what are extrapolations.
As we trend up, Dr. Stedman says context is key. This chart from OHA backdates confirmed cases to when people started having symptoms. The beginning of June was when workers at Pacific Seafood got sick in Lincoln County.
There's that huge spike, and that makes a big difference in terms of the average. Everything is relatively level, so I don't think we're seeing a really huge increase right now.
These workplace outbreaks are easier to trace, which means people with the virus can help stop the spread.
Advising them to isolate at home, following up on their contacts, advising them to quarantine for 14 days.
Other outbreak clusters at long-term care facilities are also traceable and add to the spikes.
What we have seen in the recent weeks is a big uptick in our testing capabilities and getting testing done, as well as contact tracing, which then leads to more targeted, focused, and appropriate testing so that we have a much higher likelihood of finding the cases that are out there.
And while some worry about large gatherings and demonstrations across Oregon,
they've been outside. Most of them have had masks.
Several of our experts say it's too early to know the long-term impact.
We don't have real clarity on exactly what's happening during those protests.
Multnomah County says so far about 5 demonstrators have been confirmed as sick. The county is working to up its contact tracing. 40% of recent cases have an unknown source.
We estimate that for every person with COVID-19, they cause at least one additional person to be sick.
That's part of why reopening is on hold.
The governor's done a great thing. Let's see if that really is just a blip and an outlier, or if it really is an indication of a big trend.
Dr. Stedman says with COVID, one thing is clear.
It's not over. It's not going to be over for a while.
Galen Etlin, KGW News.
A lot of people still are very unhappy that COVID restrictions are in place. A group of athletes, parents, and coaches gathered outside the Capitol in Salem demanding the state resume contact sports. They're part of the movement called Let Them Play in Oregon. They came out to play soccer and toss around footballs yesterday afternoon. They want to talk to lawmakers and let them know that keeping kids out of sports is hurting their social and emotional health.
And I think it was really important for us to bring them here, show them these are where the decisions are made, and also remind those that are making those decisions, these are real kids, and there's real negative side effects to keeping them out of their activities.
The Let Them Play movement started on Facebook in early June. The group has about 24,000 followers statewide at this point. Time right now to check your weather forecast. We want to give you a live look from our Wells Fargo Skycam. Yeah, overcast as far as you can see. So, Rod, a wet start to the work week, but I know you're saying sun is on the way.
Yeah, I was waiting with curiosity to see how you were going to describe that view from the Wells Fargo building, Brenda. Everybody's view is roughly the same, at least here in the valley. It's raining out in Gresham right now. This is a camera that's off of Powell, if you know the area, out over at Gresham Subaru, and that's about as dark as it could possibly look. Here's the radar. We are seeing some breaks in the cloud cover and some drying right now along the coast, but notice how this weather system is strong enough that's pushing rain all the way into Ontario and out across the border into Idaho at this hour. Rain totals, Tillamook, 0.4 of an inch. Newport, 32 100ths. Portland out at the airport officially still under 0.2, and Salem has just had 0.1. So there are some spotty higher amounts. For example, this shows Kelso nothing. Shows Vancouver 28 100ths of an inch. One of my Facebook followers, James, lives out in Beaverton and says he hasn't seen much of anything out in Beaverton. Although there was, since he made that posting, this heavy shower out on the west side. That's you can see the yellow and the orange there over the West Hills coming down pretty good right now. Okay, I'm running out of time, but I do want to show you our current temperature is 60 degrees. Showers continue this afternoon. No warmer than 65. Brenda, the 7-day has changes.
Ooh.
Sun bright changes. That's coming up.
We like to hear that. Thank you, Rod. We have even more weather news coming up this noon. Hear from the people who saw this tornado touch down in Damascus. Plus, Portland Pride went back to its roots this weekend, and there's even more celebrating to come. What's on tap later this week?